So really, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for accepting to join on this panel here. We want to make it an interactive panel. However, also we want to give each of the panelists some time to introduce their view on the Seoul Agenda and the Bonn Declaration. Just when preparing today, this morning, actually on the plane, I was thinking this slogan, how can singing belong to everyone, actually captures very much what the Bonn Declaration and also I think the Seoul Agenda in a very broad term mean for arts education or music education, because this meaning of belonging, if we come back to the 3 goals of the Seoul Agenda, which I will introduce shortly, is very much reflected, I think, in these 3 goals of the Seoul Agenda. So this is why I jump immediately to the Seoul Agenda. It was a conference organized by UNESCO in Seoul in 2010. Yep. And the Seoul Agenda is supposed to be an action plan to be developed collaboratively and a tool to renew the engagement and commitment for arts education. And very important, it should be a resource for arts education advocacy, so lobbying for arts education. So what is interesting about the Seoul Agenda, that it actually applies to all artistic disciplines from all over the world. So artistic disciplines from all over the world is very broad, very wide, and so the Seoul Agenda tried to find common denominators, common goals, and these are: ensure that arts education is accessible as a fundamental and sustainable component of a high-quality renewal of education. The second goal is assure that arts education activities and programs are of a high quality in conception and delivery. And the third goal of the Seoul Agenda is apply arts education principles and practices to contribute to resolving the social and cultural challenges facing the world today. So, make it short, access, quality, and social and cultural challenges. These are the 3 main goals of the Seoul Agenda. Development for the goals for the development of arts education. That's the full subtitle, Seoul Agenda. I have this PowerPoint presentation prepared, so you don't actually have to write everything now. I gave it to so you can receive it, so it's no problem. I know, because the wording is maybe a little bit complicated. So what we did then, because it's really quite broad and complex, we tried to have a look in 2011. What does this actually mean for music education in Europe? We wanted to break down these goals for a very concrete, or as concrete as possible, when we talk about music education in Europe. So when we talk about access with the Bonn Declaration, we talk about the different preconditions of the places where music education takes place. Do they reflect the needs of the learners? Are they open, the places where music education takes place, to all who wish to learn and to participate in music education? And access to music education and active music participation, so active music participation, just like repeating it constantly as a basic human right, was what Gábor also included in his introduction, is that there is the 5 IMC musical rights. I also will not repeat them, but this is one important part of it as well, this access and active participation. When we talk about high quality or quality of music education, we're talking about the basic requirements for reaching such high quality in music education. How do training institutions for educators meet these quality requirements? And how about the educators themselves? So again, when we talk about music education practitioners in the Bonn Declaration, this is it's a very quite complicated term, but for us the Bonn Declaration is for all parts of the music sector, for formal music education, non-formal and informal music education. So music teacher or music pedagogue might, for some informal practices, be far too narrow. That's why we have chosen this rather complicated term of music education practitioners, to make sure everybody feels in a way addressed. Also, there is one key assumption when we talk about quality in the Bonn Declaration, that high quality of music education contributes to personal development. Then when we talk about social and cultural challenges, so breaking again down this third goal of the Seoul Agenda, we talk about the interdependence, not independence, but rather the contrary, the interdependence of the individual and the society. How do the two relate to each other? We talk about the intrinsic and extrinsic values of music and music education. And we want to re-emphasize the potential of music for social responsibility and for intercultural dialogue. I'm sure most of you in the room know of great projects that contribute to social inclusion, to intercultural dialogue. So this is an important part which we feel is definitely also included in this third goal of the Seoul Agenda, but which should also be being aware of in music education as such. Then, of course, the promotion of diversity and the dialogue between cultures need the recognition and the consideration of musical cultures without hegemony. For that, we mean really musical diversity. All musical genres are equally important, as well as music, pop music, as well as classical music, contemporary modern music. All genres are equally important. And music education may serve as a tool for building bridges and for meeting the social and cultural challenges of European societies. And in conclusion, the Bonn Declaration ends up with a set of recommendations. I will not repeat them all. Also, the Bonn Declaration you can find on the internet. It's in a way, it's twofold. Of course, these recommendations are directed to governments and political decision makers. And of course, we ask for money. We ask that money is provided to make sure that these three goals of the Seoul Agenda and as adapted to the Bonn Declaration are given the necessary finances. But on the other hand, we also realize that a lot of these political recommendations or political legislation already in place are actually just not followed. So in a way, it's also to respect what you have written down in your legislation, because in a lot of legislation, music education or in curricula, to break it down on a school level, yeah, it's there, but it's just not being put into practice, so that also these things are really taken seriously by political educators, so political decision makers, and that these recommendations are not only about money, but that it's about taking the issue of music education and the implementation of the Seoul Agenda and the Bonn Declaration seriously in your political endeavors. So I tried to be quick. Maybe I was too quick, but that's so to say the framework in which we wanted to have this panel discussion started. Again, I think it's coming back to my first remark, I think really that how can singing belong to everyone? You can now really see that access is a part of belonging, social and cultural challenges is a part of belonging, and I think we might also probably discuss how quality can also be a part of belonging. So I think for me, this slogan very well connects to the Bonn Declaration and music education in singing or singing in music education. So now it's my pleasure to hand over the microphone to Mary Stakelum, who was already introduced by Gábor, but I would also just like to make a little addition that you are also a member of the board of the European Association for Music in Schools. So we're very interested to get your view on the context that I was trying to outline in the frame of the formal music education perspective, as well as maybe also a view from the UK's perspective.
Thank you very much. That's a tall order, but I'll try to do my best. I've chosen to look at England really rather than the UK, actually, and to start with maybe giving you some of the context in which I work. I work in music education with primary and secondary level. So I work with specialists and non-specialists, and also, I work with continuing professional development. So I'm very lucky to be, I feel, at the coalface of this great time of change. And when I was preparing for this, I thought I'd stick to structure and policy. They were the two words that particularly interested me. So I can't cover everything. I'll just try to look at some of the recent practices. And in a way, I feel that England has been very much to the forefront in terms of access. Just to give you a bit of context, with the government in 2007, access was at the heart of their policy. They wanted every child who wanted to learn a musical instrument should have the opportunity to do that, which is a wonderful aspiration. So there was money attached. However, as we can see, there are issues. It's not just about money. Just the wider opportunities was a particular scheme focused at giving every child in primary school an opportunity to learn to play a musical instrument. And the system in England is that there are, it's not just happening in the school, but there are specialists or peripatetic teachers who come from outside the school, formal school curriculum, and they usually are local. So we have music services, and the school buys in their expertise. So the class teacher doesn't necessarily teach the children music, which is an important point. And the second really important stepping stone towards access, if you like, is Sing Up. This was a program for primary schools, and it was introduced with the agenda of making every school a singing school. So you might say, well, what does that mean? It was part of the Music Manifesto's national singing programme. It was produced by a number of partners, which is again an important, I think, an important point in terms of ownership, belonging, diversity. It's not just about the school teacher; it's about all the different agents, So I've just put them here for you. You can read them if you wish. But it was to ensure that primary school-aged children experience high-quality singing, both within and outside of their school curriculum, on a daily basis. And the definition of a singing school was where where every child had an opportunity to sing for at least 5 minutes every day. So it's a modest aspiration, but nevertheless, it was a start. And it was also to ensure that every school has a teacher committed to facilitating high-quality singing and vocal work. And interestingly, it was funded from 2007 to 2011, and it was a huge number of resources which are still around and still available to schools. But from 2012, not surprisingly, the money was sort of disappeared, if you like, and so the Sing Up, the legacy was that the schools would buy into it and register and then get the resources. I mean, obviously there are lots of issues that I'm not going to go into in that, but this is just to give you a whistle-stop tour. And then more recently, and this is which maps on very nicely onto the timing of the Bonn Declaration, a new national plan, which is this government's agenda. And I think this is important because it, for the first time, addresses all the agents and gives it, a collective responsibility that, music needs to happen in schools. Every child needs to have a rich musical education, and it's a shared responsibility. And I think that's a huge challenge that we shouldn't underestimate. But the most important thing there for you, if you would look at, is the music hubs. What formerly were the music services has now sort of dissipated, and music hubs were supposed to be, as the word implies, a central point, and they would be responsible for giving the whole class ensemble instrumental music and singing, and supplementing the work of the school. But importantly, the school is expected to deliver the statutory curriculum requirements, and that's important. But it's an interesting aspect of access through partnerships. So the music hubs, there are now 123 music hubs throughout the country, and they're funded via Arts Council England, which again is an important point. It's certainly overseen by the Department for Education and the Department for Culture, but the Arts Council has an active role in ensuring that it happens. So all of the music services applied, and some of them were accepted and so on. But so it's a change of the way of the landscape in music education in England. However, to cut to the at the moment, there are some issues with implementation. And my point really is, it's all very well having the intention to have access, but there are issues, because although the policy has changed, many of the same providers have come from a tradition themselves, and it's very hard to unlearn and relearn new practices, and I think that's what we're finding. So the Office for Standards in Education, Children's Services and Skills, or Ofsted as it's affectionately known, reviewed the work of the hubs in November, just last year, and they found that there was a low expectation among senior school leaders, and these are the people who decide where the money goes. So in effect, they were saying, well, we don't really know if it's any good. So we don't really know if we're getting value for money, which is a little bit of a worry when we consider everybody wants value for money. The insufficient emphasis on performance and enjoyment. And it's not enough to say, well, the children enjoy singing and they love performing. It's not enough, according to the Ofsted. And again, the pupils and the students in secondary school, their expectations tended to be low. This was from the Ofsted report. And few of them are still prepared to study music after the statutory age limit. And finally, the singing is underused in school, which is a big disappointment, given that we've had the sing up idea. So my final point to you, and to raise the discussion, if not right now, perhaps later on, is what questions should we be asking now? And so I've just put these together. Hopefully they're not too provocative, but they are coming from my own personal professional stance. How do we develop the hubs to deliver more than what has been described as conservatoire-style operations with a core repertoire of mainly classical or chamber music, delivering tiered progression ensembles, individual tuition, gala performances and grade exams? In other words, that it's so output-driven rather than process. And secondly, with reports of very few examples of hip-hop, digital, folk or ethnic world ensembles in UK schools, can we really claim in the UK that our music education truly embraces cultural diversity? And this is directly, I think, related to the Bonn Declaration. I think we need to find a way to unravel that. And universally, is there a tension between access and quality? And there are the two flagships, if you like, of the Bonn Declaration. So it's, again, everybody wants to do music, but then, it needs to be quality. And that's a tension. And I noticed that the word high quality is used as if everybody understands what high quality is. Well, I want to say, well, what does it mean? Can we have a discussion about what quality means and what high quality means? I think that's really important. And allied to that, the notion of quality music versus quality music education. Very, very thorny issues, and I welcome discussions on that. And finally, this is my naive hope to maybe move forward. Should we attempt a quality roadmap? And I looked, I'll leave you with this, which is just an example which the Arts Council in England have put together, and I thought it was a nice way to map out your aspiration, to say, well, what would it look like? They've put together a quality roadmap to monitor and assess work produced by, with and for young people by the organisations they fund. So some way of evaluating, some way of saying, well, what's happening and are we happy with it? It's not enough, I suppose this is my parting shot, it's not enough to give the money, to have the aspiration and the intention, but there's a cultural shift which affects all of us involved in music education, which I think we really need to address. And please do get in touch with me if you have anything else if you want to disagree with me, I'd be really happy. I hope that was 5 minutes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think a lot of questions that you raised at the end that I think we will be happy to come back maybe later with the whole panel, and maybe if we find some more time, even with you in the audience. I would like to give the floor now to Sonja Greiner. She is the Secretary General of Europa Cantat. She has been on the board of the European Music Council and the International Music Council, and she will, I guess, probably explain us a little bit how the choral world has taken up the Bonn Declaration and what, how you work with that.
Thank you, Simone. Yes, you heard that there were some suggestions, demands at the end of the Bonn Declaration, and that they are not only addressed to politicians, they are also addressed to ourselves. We will not make a change if we don't think about change. So I will talk a little bit about how we try to make the change from our perspective. So in my case, I'm talking about the non-formal music sector outside schools, outside conservatoires, because this is how we work. And I'm going to focus on singing and vocal choral music. We're finding it more and more difficult to choose the correct word we want to choose in this. And but we also cooperate with the formal sector, and we think that this is very important. We have been involved in the process of the Bonn Declaration, so we have been following all the conferences and meetings, which inspired us in many ways. And I think there are several layers of how to apply it. First of all, a discussion we had at one of the conferences is we have to join forces, and we have to join forces even with the other art sectors. But in order to do so, we have to start in our own corner. So we also have to look at what are the specific needs of our sector first, and then go one step up and ask the other sectors, what are your needs? Then find our common needs, then go one step up and join the other art forms. We made a beautiful drawing at the last Budapest conference about this. And so we think that we have to advocate directly for singing in music education, because that's what we stand for, and I will try to explain why. But we also advocate for music education at large, because if there is no music education, there is no singing in music education. It's very simple. And if there is no music education, there is no singing at some point. So we cannot only focus on the singing. You will find some of this reflected already in the Voice project that Gábor mentioned. Maybe some of you heard Kunrad in his presentation about the Voice for Vocal Music, which I think was already this morning, where we picked up, and of course this symposium in a way is a direct outcome of the Bonn Declaration, because we started thinking about this kind of things when we came to the meetings and conferences of the Bonn Declaration. So in Voice, one of the subjects we dealt with was already how to build bridges between the choral sector and the formal music education sector in schools, because we realized that in many countries there is actually very little connection between the choral field and the field of music teachers. So we are talking about singing in schools, but we don't even talk to the people who should be singing in schools. So maybe there's something wrong there. And there was a project researching good examples that I think included Sing Up, of how you can bring singing into the schools and increase the cooperation. Now, if I look at the first goal, access, we believe, and of course here I'm preaching to the converted, but I still have to say it, we believe that the voice is an ideal tool to allow access to music education to everybody. Basically because everybody, with very, very few exceptions, has a voice and can use it from birth to death. Maybe use it a bit better or use it a bit less well, but can use it. Basically, everybody can sing. Maybe not everybody can sing beautifully or correctly, but everybody can sing unless they're totally deaf or have no voice. We find that quite clear, but astonishingly enough, this is not common knowledge. I have found out that a lot of people are not aware of the fact that the voice is actually an instrument we can use. There are those beautiful initiatives saying every child should get an instrument. Now, if you try to have singing lessons in these schemes, they will tell you, no, singing is not an instrument. So sorry, you can't sing in this scheme. You have to play an instrument. In Germany, we had a program called Jedem Kind sein Instrument. And then they had to create a contra program called Jedem Kind seine Stimme, each child its voice, because the other project had not accepted the voice as an instrument. So I think that's one of the points that we're talking about and fighting for. Let's recognize that the voice is an instrument. It's a cheap instrument. It's available to everybody, and it can be very useful. We are thus working on a campaign also in the coming years, using some research as a basis to talk more about the benefits of singing together. Singing can be done throughout your life. It's a lifelong access possibility. It can be offered from birth, from before birth, as Kodai said. It starts 9 months before the birth of the baby. You will maybe see in the program also that we have published a Lullaby Collection, and many people ask us, well, but this has nothing to do with choral music. And I say, yes, but it has to do with singing and music education, because if you don't start singing in the families, where should the singers come from later? So we start from the very early age. We do a lot for children and young people, we do a lot for adults, and we are trying to do more and more for 60 plus, as we call the people who are in the third age, golden age, whatever you want to call it, because in Europe more and more people will be in this age group, and we need to take care of them as well. To be honest, I must say that this is the part that we find most difficult still, because on the other hand, people of this category often don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be put in separate events. Actually, what they want is to sing together with the young people. So all the activities we have been offering only for 60 plus have not been very successful so far, which means that we have to rethink our strategy in this direction. However, we also organize events that bring all generations together. There are family events, there are events where we simply mix people of different generations. We also support the demand for music education as compulsory aspect of curricula, which goes back to what Mary said, that if you give the choice to young people and they don't know what it is, they will often say no. It has to be compulsory, it has to be a proper subject in the school curriculum, otherwise you will not get the results you want to get. Within this, we think that singing as participatory activity must be part of music education everywhere as much as possible. We are trying to cooperate with the formal sector in order to achieve these aims, and we are planning now already the follow-up project on the voice project, as Gábor said. And some of the cooperation in this project will also be to work together, for example, with the Association of Conservatoires, which will lead us to the second point in a moment. We will also try to include the new aspects of society. It's mentioned somewhere under the second goal. Also, we have to adapt to the changed society. In the choral world, we see that we may need to be more diverse in our repertoire. So are we really diverse? Are we really doing all the repertoire that exists for singing? And are we using all the technical possibilities that digital age is offering? Or do we just think, oh, these crazy young people are sitting in front of their computers all the time, but we don't want to hear about it? So we're going to offer a workshop on computer game music at our next festival, for example, because we realize that we have to look into these things, but we will also look into how to use the technique for performances and for concerts. We find that many conductors, when you give them a light plan, don't know what to do with it. So they can't actually plan a performance that is sexy and uses light and everything, because they have no clue. They need to be trained on that. So this leads me to the second point, the second goal, which is quality. I think we all agree that it's not enough to sing or to offer music education. It has to be in good quality, otherwise it's useless. For us, it means music teachers have to learn how to sing correctly. And where you're not in the luxury of having specialized musicians, especially kindergarten teachers and elementary school teachers who haven't even studied music, have to learn how to sing the right way with children. I had the talk this morning. Most teachers sing too low, for example, with little children. This is a great problem. They are damaging the voices. So they're doing something good, and at the same time they're doing something bad. So we need to train them on that. We need to train conductors in formal education and in informal education for all kinds of choirs, ages, levels, and specifically because it doesn't require the same skills to conduct a children's choir as to conduct a choir of 60 plus, to conduct a professional choir or an amateur choir. And we have to teach the conductors to modernize their way of thinking and working and performing especially. We have to teach them how to use technique, how to use the modern possibilities. And finally, for the third goal, social and cultural challenges. We have been discussing singing and inclusion for many years and have been supporting and organizing all kinds of projects, like for the inclusion of cultural minorities through singing, the inclusion of disabled singers, but also projects using singing as a bridge between cultures and conflicting groups. For example, we have the event Singing the Bridge that was organized in Debrecen in Hungary for the first time, where we bring choirs from cultures that have religious, cultural conflicts with each other, and we let them sing together. We have a series of Hearts in Harmony projects, which originally meant bringing together disabled and non-disabled singers, but now inclusion there is broader, and it also includes people with learning disabilities, people in prisons, or other people who are at the margin of society. And a topic that will become more and more important is singing with people with dementia, because again, we have more and more old people who are suffering from Alzheimer or other dementia illnesses, and it has turned out that singing with them is something that can help them tremendously. And by the way, lullabies can come back there, because singing lullabies with people with dementia who at least still learned to sing lullabies when they were children can help them, because it's the earliest musical memory they may have. So what we want to do now for the coming years is to have a proper strategy for this third goal, because we think that we are not strategic enough yet, and to develop an inclusion strategy. And part of our next project will focus around this inclusion strategy, how we can develop it and how we can cooperate with other sectors as well. I think that's all for the moment.
Thank you very much. So I think it's it already gives me, of course, some of the keywords that have been introduced, but I think some of the keywords to discuss later a little bit more. But now it's my pleasure to welcome Gábor Bodnár. Gábor is a composer and music theory teacher, and maybe so a professor for music theory as well here at the ETHEM. Now, what was it exactly? The university you're? Exactly, sorry, yeah. And you have been a member of, or you are a member of Psalmus, and you attended the Seoul conference where the Seoul agenda was developed, and it would be very interesting to get your insight. Maybe a reflection is, can you really reflect, or do you think that the Bonn Declaration actually is a good way of translating the Seoul agenda, or do you think, well, they went a little bit too far? But especially it would also be interesting to hear your view also from the Hungarian perspective. And I think you also have a presentation.
Thank you. Yes, today at Truth I did a pretty long PPT demonstration, but simply will introduce my faculty and my department, and what can we do for future music teachers, and what can we do for the Bonn Declaration. It's the building is in the campus of the ELTE when the music department takes place. Yes, and I want to say about the changes of the methods. I think it's, yes? Okay. So let me shortly introduce my department as an important place of the Hungarian school music teacher training for public education, and perhaps an important place for realizing the recommendations of the Bonn Declaration in the degree programs. But I've chosen a special way. I want to show it through the often changing mode of the Hungarian teacher training method. First of all, in the beginning, only primary school teachers were trained. After, by joining the Faculty of Humanities, university teacher training became available, so students will be secondary school teachers as well. And a change came, and Hungary became the member of the European Union, which is a pretty good thing, and I'm personally pleased. But a change came in the program, and the BA-MA system was introduced in the study. After, a change came in the previous year, and we began to teach in the so-called undivided educational system, which is a 4-year plus 1 year, or a 5th year plus 1 year method. So what can we do under these frequently changing circumstances for the future music teachers and for the goals of the Bonn Declaration? I write our goal, of course, remain the same, to educate talented persons who could become talented music teacher. Sorry. Yes, you can see the main elements of the degree program. At the moment, there exists a master program after finishing an undergraduate degree program, and this undivided program, which is together with another degree program, for example, English or history, Hungarian literature, and so on. The subjects are the same as usually: theory, solfege, music history. Piano playing is very important because that's really very important for the other subject and for itself. And there are auxiliary subjects which can be changed frequently, for example, score reading or organology or folk music or folk dance, historical dance, and so on. And of course, methodology, teaching and pedagogy. Yes, what are the special advantage of the frequently changing situation in accordance with the Bonn Declaration? You have the possibility of renewing the curricula frequently, because when a method is changing, you must renew the curricula, and must renew perhaps together with the other institutions. There are 6 institutions exist in Hungary for the same goal, for music teacher training, school music teacher training method, and we don't disturb each other, so we are good friends in renewing the curricular and cross-curricular programs as well. Yes, for example, in the BA program, we did a syndicate for a common program. So that's a Hungarian proverb in the last line, that make a virtue of necessity. That means that you can do good things in a hard situation. Yes, you can see the principles of the declaration as questions. So today, the truth, I did this a little bit strange way of enlightening this method. First of all, I read a question that how can we coordinate the principles of the declaration with our task in the teacher training, and how can we keep the high standard of the education among such changing circumstances? And let's see a special mode again. Make questions from the statements and ask for the students. For example, I must read. How can you reach these goals in your future workplace, and how can you resolve the cultural and social challenges there? Or how can you realize the talented pupils in all social and cultural environments? And we ask ourselves as well that how can we teach future teachers to declare the declaration? And how could we care the talent of the future talent, because music teachers are talented people, and they must take care future talents. These are real questions, and I think we won't answer it at the moment, perhaps in the next discussion. I think that it was a pretty long time, and I don't want to take so much time. Just with a few words, mentioned Psalmos Humanus Association for Arts Education. We are in cooperation with this association in formal and non-formal education. I mean, we could do our job in school and out of school as well, and in university and out of university as well. And just show you, the main goals of the association. We have a common program for talent caring and a common program for postgraduating teacher program. You can just read I try to illustrate the view that the goal of this program is the integrated arts education for everybody. And these are the main programs of the... And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, I don't know, until what time can we continue, Gábor? What would you say?
We have a wrap-up session at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
We're supposed to have also
Some coffee. Okay.
before that, so I think we still have
Like 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes. Let's make it.
yes.
Okay, good. 5 to 8. Okay. Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting to see the different approaches, but also to actually see that there are quite some commonalities. And for me, apart from the quality debate that you have raised in your question, I think what I would like to hear actually from all the three of you in a very short reflection. To me, it seems that changes, on the one hand, the changes are imposed upon us by legislation, by cultural policy developments, like you come from the Music Manifesto to the national plan, or what was it? Here you have the changes in curriculum. And then you also said, but you have these people there in their places for a long time. And so this is one thing that I think is a challenge. Do you have any maybe suggestions or ideas how these changes can really put into practice, how to make a virtue out of the necessity? Do you have some examples, for example, where you have seen it working, or is it really one of the key things? We can have a lot of wonderful things on paper, how we want to change music education, but actually if the headmaster XYZ is not convinced, we will not change anything. I mean,
You're asking me.
yes, I mean, it's a little bit a question.
Okay, thank you. No, that's really important because it just strikes me that we have government-driven agendas in, say, England, but in Hungary it was a person-led revolution, with Kodai, and I think there's something to be learned from that. We need inspirational people, among them people in this room, just to say, well, this is what we need to push this forward. What I find my particular interest is working with generalist primary schools teachers, the people who are afraid, who have the lack of confidence that I think was mentioned this morning by people, and that's very difficult. And I work very hard with those people, particularly on short in-service courses, just to allow them to just have an opportunity to hear their own voice. That it's okay, we're not expecting perfection. It's about the process, and I think we need. I know process was worked on many years ago. I think we need to look at it again, but look at process with quality. I think we can have both. And with my researcher hat on, I've done some research with primary teachers in my particular catchment area, asking them about how teachable music is. It was really interesting. Those who had gone through some formal education themselves thought, yes, music is teachable. Clearly, it was reflected in their own experience. Those who hadn't thought, no, it's not teachable. You either have it or you haven't. Music is a talent. I can't sing. There's no way I can teach music. And for me, that's a challenge that needs to be addressed, and something that I'm actively working on at the moment. So, and of course, then the postgraduate research, which is another hat, which is where the European Association for Music in Schools comes in. We have a doctoral student forum, which I lead, and it's really interesting to hear those questions being asked. And we need more of that. We need more people asking the important questions, because there's room for everybody. And with that, I'll pass on to Sonja.
Thank you. I would love to have a quality discussion as well, but I think it will take too much time. But also in the social projects, we always try to make sure that when we speak about quality, it's not the musical quality, or not alone the musical quality, but other aspects. But the changes imposed, I think we all know them. For us, it's maybe more the European Union. They invent a new program and they suddenly have a lot of new keywords, and then we sit there and try to think, how does our program fit? Actually, very often we find out that we have been doing for 40 years what suddenly comes up as a new thing on the government paper, and we just have to give it a new name. So we have been networking since the 60s, and suddenly the word network became sexy in Europe in the 90s or beginning of the 21st century. So sometimes it's just that you have to change your vocabulary, and it hasn't changed that much. But sometimes you have to use the opportunity. And we have found out that whenever we talk about innovation, we come to the point, because we're working on a European level, that innovation is very difficult, because usually when we come up with a new idea, somebody has already been doing it. And actually what we find out is that inspiration is one of the answers to that. Collecting examples of good practice, bringing people together to exchange their knowledge and ideas, and then you will find out that one of them has a more advanced idea than another one and may drag the others out a little bit of what they have been doing for 20 years. So that's one of the answers. And you have to have a very strong message and have it again and again, because also we deal with conductors who have been working the same way forever, and we'd want to try to get them used to new ways of working. And this is a long process, I think. But we are also process-oriented. That's something I want to say. For us, this is very important. All our activities, we say the main focus is on the process. We also want a nice result, but the main thing is what happens on the way to it.
So as you were talking a lot about change, I would like to, again, how did you make the virtue out of the necessity? And
Yes, I think we simply try to do our best. So it's under various circumstances, and Kodai himself lived in various circumstances, and the changing method is was a various method, and simply we need to qualify music teachers, choir music teachers, and simply make choir and travel with the choirs and just sing. And I think it's the same that the goals of the Declaration. Yes, that's all I think.
yeah.
When we prepared our new project, one thing that we came across is that sometimes it helps to look at the other sectors. Sometimes they are more advanced than you are, and for them something may seem totally natural that for you is new and challenging. So we are trying to do that more as well, and I think that might be a next step from the Bonn Declaration to join forces also with the other art forms.
Sorry,
Yes, just to add one sentence to Sonja. Yes, regarding the European Choral Association, what we are trying to use as many times as possible is fully in comprehension with that Sonja said, that quality doesn't mean every time the result. The quality can be a quality way, a quality process. And this is what makes our initiatives to organize learning process festivals, learning together, practice together, perform together. It doesn't matter if the performance in the end will be an optimal quality, but the way how from point A the pupils, the students, the singers reached point B can be the highest quality ever, even though the result is not a quality, so a high quality. So this is the biggest contradiction between a learning choral activity and festival and a competition, for instance, because competition is judging the quality of the performance, while an atelier and a workshop is trying to judge the way how they are reaching this quality in the end.
Just on that, there was just a quick point. I think in terms of quality as well and value, certainly from my work with student teachers, you know, they're intelligent people and they want their activity to be valued. And I think the word integrity has to come in, integrity of intention and an authentic voice. Even if it is their first articulation of something, if it's authentic, well then that's the first step on the road to quality. And just a little final thing, in the research I mentioned, one of the other questions I asked my teachers was what did they value in their formative music experiences. And interestingly, and a little worryingly, most of them valued the formal lessons more than, say, singing in church or singing with groups or informally. And I just wondered, that's another thing that I have to think about when changing the culture, because there's a pressure maybe from society. There's a perception that one of them is held in higher regard than the other. And I think we could do something to change that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gábor, do you have something to add, or? Okay, so because I was about to before Gábor, you came in, I was about to try and ask everybody here what is quality for you, but I think you gave a wonderful kind of two-way out, or two views on it, and I think these two views are good for a short glimpse now, and the quality debate as such is for sure very elaborate and very deep and very detailed. I would like to thank you all for joining us here, for sharing your views, and I'm sorry that we don't have the time to open up the floor, but there's coffee outside, and so you're happy to address us outside at coffee, and thank you very much for joining us.